Welcome to my Full Life and Faith Leaps podcast with me, Tiffany Jo Baker, where we help you experience God's power and rest in your purpose and progress as you move forward step by step in all the things God has called and created you to do at home and around the world. Hi, y'all. This is Tiffany Jo Baker coming at you once again with my Full Life and Faith Leaps podcast. And today we're going to be diving in to how to release control and recover from perfectionism. So I'm not going to ask for all of us who are recovering or recovered perfectionists to raise your hands, but if I were to, I would be the first one to raise my hand. I'm excited to have on here to share a little bit about her journey and what she's learned as she's healed and as she's moved from perfectionism to complete surrender to the Lord. Rachel Jobe. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Hi, Tiffany. Thank you for having me.
Y'all, if you don't know Rachel, she is coming through the power of Zoom, video conferencing, all the way from Southeast Asia, where her and her husband have been, and her 3 boys are living as missionaries for the last 10 years doing church development work. She's the author of this book, Let Go. And it is, let me tell you the subtitle, Transform Your Life Out of Frustration. We could just pause right there. Transform your life out of frustration and defeat by giving God control. Oh my goodness, I have so many questions because I say I'm a recovered perfectionist. Partly because I believe in the power of my words instead of recovering. Partly because I have done so much work and truly have killed any hustle that is left in my bloodstream. I no longer have the desire to hustle or to strive. And honestly, sometimes I think I'm on the other side, where I think sometimes God's like, hey, Tiffany, like, come over on the other side. I've learned the power of Sabbath and rest. And I think having so many babies has really helped me when part of my story is being a surrogate, where I've carried twins 2 times. And so I had to be restful in order to do that. So that was really part of my journey, but we're not here to hear my journey. We're here to hear about your journey. So for your journey of releasing control and recovering from perfectionism, was it like this aha moment that you realized I am dealing with perfectionism? Or was it something that was maybe more slow in revealing or understanding that? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I definitely didn't realize in the moment the control, or I guess the chains that it had put me in. I didn't realize that. In my mind, it was just I was trying to be responsible and take care of the things that needed to be taken care of. And I I remember so vividly struggling with always being frustrated. I was impatient when things didn't go my way. And in my mind, it was because I thought I had a high standard that I wanted to live up to. And I wanted my family and my house and my work, my ministry, everything to meet this standard. But of course, life happens. Nothing ever, nothing goes the way we want it to go. And so I was continually frustrated. I would get angry. I was stressed, depressed. And I knew these things were not fruits of the spirit. And I desperately wanted freedom from these things, from the anger and the impatience, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to not be this mess of emotions. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting in my house one afternoon, just begging God to give me freedom from these things. Mm-hmm. And Matthew 5:6 came to my mind that says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." And I burst into tears. I knew that was God telling me that help was coming. And I was so relieved by that. And I didn't know how it would happen. I didn't realize that it would come with me kicking and screaming the whole way, but I knew that freedom was coming. And that really was a turning point for me. That's when things started to change, or soon after that, things really started to change. And actually, the biggest way that it happened was when my life was kind of turned upside down, when I came down with a chronic physical condition. And there have been different seasons where I've been bedridden for weeks or months at a time. And And when that first happened, all these things that I thought were so important,
Mhm.
that these things that I thought had to be done,
Yeah.
couldn't be done.
Mhm.
And in my mind, I thought the world might end. Like everything is going to fall apart because I'm not doing these things. Nobody else is doing these things, and everything's going to fall apart. And what happened
Mhm.
is that it didn't fall apart. The world kept spinning just fine as I was in bed and
Mhm.
or sitting in my chair, unable to do anything. The world kept spinning just fine.
Mhm.
And that's when the Lord really began to minister to me. First of all, because I had time to spend with him. Before, I was so busy trying to do these things that I didn't spend time just sitting in his presence. But now, after I was kind of physically incapable of doing anything, the Lord was kind of like, you literally don't have anything else to do. Like, just sit with me.
Mhm.
And he just began to speak so tenderly, as he does. He just began to speak so tenderly about my value, that my value was not in my performance. It was not in the state of my house, how clean or tidy my house was, and the quality of the meals that I prepared or snacks that I prepared for my kids. It was not in any of these outward things, these surface level things that we tend to look at. And so that's when the Lord really began to do some deep work in me. And it was, I wish I could say I jumped in readily, but I was kicking and screaming the whole time. I really wanted to be out doing these things, but the Lord just, he made me sit still. He made me lie down in green pastures.
Mhm.
And it really changed my life. It really
Mhm.
changed my life.
Said something that like I picked up on is some of the things as perfectionists that we tend to tell ourselves to keep us in that cycle, the lies that we believe. And one of them that I
Mm-hmm.
heard that you said was being responsible. And a lot of
Yeah.
us have grown up in families where being responsible and a good steward, um, um, I have some good friends that they really didn't play as children. They were required to constantly be producing. And so that has, in turn, led them as adults to um, a similar place that we found ourselves, of those moments where the Lord has said, I love Matthew 11:28 through 30, come to me, all you labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And he
Mm-hmm.
talks about rest for your soul. And that's what the
Yes.
other verse that you shared. And so this is like a place that not only do we look like we're striving on the outside and constantly moving. I mean, there were times where my husband would literally stand in the middle of our kitchen just with his arms out for a hug. And I'm like, I don't even have time to give you a hug. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
he's just like,
Yeah.
but on the outside, we look like we're just doing, striving, but it's the same on the inside. The
Yeah.
inside, our souls and our spirit man are so weary and
Mm-hmm.
striving and lacking. Even though if you look at our to-do list, check off list, man, it looks like we've got it all going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but that's not always the case. We have one of our pastors taught me the difference between perfectionism and excellence. And you talk about that in your book. And I'm going to read one of the quotes that you had from your book. You said, perfectionism is a cheap counterfeit to true excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us more about the difference on perfectionism versus excellence?
Yeah. With perfectionism, I think it comes from a desire to be excellent in different areas of our lives, but we're looking at surface level things. We're looking at the fruit. So just to use a fruit tree as an analogy, say we have a fruit tree that's producing bad fruit. And so I think, okay, the perfectionism looks like, okay, I'm going to cut off this bad fruit and I'm going to tie a good, healthy fruit onto this tree. And so you go around cutting off the bad fruit and tying on good fruit because we're looking at surface level things. We're looking at surface markers, the things that we know a good healthy fruit tree has good fruit. So we're tying on fruit onto this fruit tree, even though in reality that doesn't make it a healthy fruit tree. That's a superficial fix. If we want to make a healthy fruit tree, we look at the roots and we make sure the roots are healthy. And if the tree and the roots are healthy, it will produce fruit. Good, Jesus says a good tree produces good fruit. And that's just how reality works. But perfectionism is looking at these surface markers and striving after those things instead of looking at the root, where the life source. So Jesus says in John 15, I am the vine, you are the branches. Abide in me, and you will bear fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing, he says. And so that it really does come down to, so excellence comes from living out of the right life source, abiding in the vine. Or Galatians 5 talks about the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace. Well, in my season of striving, I wanted peace. I wanted joy. I wanted these things so badly, but I was looking at things like for a peace. I wanted a peaceful house. And so I thought, okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? My house needs to be tidy. It needs to not be rowdy and rambunctious. I had 3 little boys. And so, if I'm looking at these things, if I want quiet, I want tidy, I want clean, it's not going to happen. And so peace is not going to happen from these outward markers. The lack of peace was not coming from those things. The lack of peace was due to the state of my heart. It was the state of my heart, my striving, my wanting to perform, my looking at these outward things to get my sense of self-worth, actually, instead of looking to the Lord and finding my value in him. And when we are, so back to Galatians 5, it says the fruit of the Spirit, and that goes back to this idea of abiding. We don't have to pursue the fruits of the Spirit. We don't have to pursue peace or joy. The way we accomplish those things is by walking in the Spirit. If we're walking in the Spirit, we will have the fruit of the Spirit. And so it's perfectionism versus excellence it's a difference in our approach. One is looking at superficial fruits, trying to change the fruits, and one is looking at the root. And if we are abiding in the Lord, walking in the Spirit, then we will naturally have lives that are full of joy and patience and peace, kindness, gentleness, all the fruits of the Spirit. Those will just naturally be there.
That's so good. That's so good. And for me, perfectionism was like, it would never be good enough.
Yeah.
So you give yourself this standard, but it was never good enough. It was there always needed to be more or better or quicker or faster or more expensive or whatever. And so you're like chasing this thing that's impossible to achieve. And that's maddening in and of itself.
Yeah.
In of
As soon
itself.
as soon as you meet the standard that you've placed for yourself, another higher standard comes along that you feel like you have to achieve. The finish line is always moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just practically speaking, one of the things that shifted for me going from perfectionism to excellence was instead of me, I love me to have a clean house. Instead of it being like my house has to be perfect all the time and clean and picked up all the time, we would do something called like power hour. Like we have an hour to clean this house this week, and we're going to do the best we can with what we have. And at the end of the hour, I was good with whatever we came up with, whatever we did, because that's what we had. We had an hour. And so to me, excellence is also doing the best with what you have, where perfectionism is this unachievable standard and driving force that just keeps your wheels spinning and spinning. So that was changing for me too, just to have like that practical change in my life that I could see, in the day to day of being like, it's okay, set it down. Or my to-do list wasn't done. It's okay. Guess what? It will be there waiting for you tomorrow. It's all right. And like you said, like when we go through those seasons where it's like, we just can't physically do it, you really get to see what's important. And that is the abiding, and that is the fruit of the Holy Spirit, because out of that, it doesn't matter what storm you're in. you're going to have the foundation you need to ride the storm well, whether you're on the hill or the valley. You have that foundation of the fruit of the presence of God. You're gonna ride out
Mhm.
whatever your circumstance and your season is well. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so speaking of root, what do you think the root problem is that drives perfectionism in people?
I think a lot of times the root problem is in feeling like we need to perform
Mhm.
to get that's where our sense of value comes from, is how well we do things. And we want to we want to control our situation, our circumstances, our life, our appearance, the way we appear to the world. And you know, Genesis 3, that was the serpent's temptation to Eve. He said, "Eat this fruit, you will become like God."
Mhm.
And that was the temptation. And that's, I think all of us, if we're honest, we want to be God over our lives. We want to have control. We want to control
Mhm.
the way others perceive us.
Yeah.
We want to control the hearts of our children or our spouse or any number of things, you name it. We like to be in control. And
Mhm.
and so perfectionism is my way of trying to control the way others perceive me, to control the way I perceive me, instead of finding my value in the King of Kings and what he did for me, the
Mhm.
finding my value as a daughter of the King.
Uh, so I mean that just resonates for sure. The word control, we hear control freak. I mean, I could just it's a synonym, right, for perfectionism. Like I'm a recovered control freak, kind of
Hmm.
basically.
Yeah.
Um, So, and in the counseling field, we often will talk about behaviors and things we're doing as goal-directed behaviors. And so we're trying to do these things because we want a specific goal. And so you name some of those goals so well, like control how people see us, how we see ourselves, how we think we feel, having things in a neat, tidy bow externally, because internally we're like ducks with our, you know,
Hmm.
above the water is looking cool, calm, cool, collected. Below it, our little paddles are
Yeah.
going. Um, but your whole book, Let Go, and your journey has answered the question to perfectionism and to the need for control. And for you, that came through a process of surrender, of giving up your agenda and your plans and your ways of seeing things to the one who made you and who has the ultimate plan for your life. So, can you talk to us a little bit about surrender and maybe some things, some keys of how we can realize, oh, I'm not really surrendered, maybe in that area?
Yeah. Yeah. Surrender, surrendering control really is what it is. And I, you mentioned in the book, I talk about different areas that I learned in different seasons that I needed to control. So one was my plans. I need to surrender my to-do list to the Lord. Another is my strategies. I need to give that to him. Another is my thought life. I need to surrender my thoughts to him, to his way of doing things, taking my thoughts captive. But these all have to do with recognizing my desire to control these aspects of my life and loosening my grip,
Mm-hmm.
holding all these things with open palms. It's okay for us to make plans. That's good. God gave us minds. He wants us to be strategic, but he wants us to hold these things
Mm-hmm.
with open palms, recognizing that his ways are so much higher than our ways. And 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 so our plans for our lives are of course going to interfere, are going to be in conflict with his plans if his ways are so much higher than ours. And so if we can just learn to trust that he really is best. And if we focus on abiding, living a life of abiding in him and surrender the results to him, he will do, as Ephesians says, is exceedingly abundantly more than anything we could ask or imagine. We will see everything about our lives change, our marriage, our relationships with our kids, not just our relationships with our kids, but he will use us to breathe life into our kids instead of strangling them with all metaphorically strangling them with all these rules and
And
regulations about,
expectations and yeah.
yes,
Hmm. Yeah.
yes. And he will use us to breathe life into the giftings that he has placed in them, to water the seeds that he has placed in them. And it really is transformational. It changes everything. In my just in ministry and the ministry plans that Jim and I have had, nothing ever goes according to plan. And so if we are just stuck on trying to steer things the way we want it to go, we're going to miss the much larger work that the Lord wants us to be involved in. And if we can just keep our eyes on him and give him the control and follow his lead, he will lead us to what he wants us to do on any given day, any given moment. And sometimes if we're not thinking of it as being surrendered, if we're not thinking of it as being willing to follow his lead, then we're going to see when things don't happen our way, we're going to see it as interruptions, and we're going to get frustrated. But if we're
So true.
surrendered, yeah, if we're holding these things with an open palm, then we're willing to say, okay, God, this is what you have for me today. And
Yeah.
we embrace it, and we can have joy and peace and patience with that, knowing that he is on his throne and he is the one at the wheel. He's the one steering things the way that he wants them to go.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it helps me to realize like I'm just a steward. It's not mine. Like this isn't
Yeah.
it's really not my life. Like I
Mm.
want to be where it's his. It's his story, his purposes, and I happen to be a vessel that he's using. Um so what does it look like to you to surrender your to-do list or your strategy? Is that like? Do you literally like, here, God, change this, or do you ask him ahead of time? Like, what does that look like to you for you?
Well, this is something I'm continuing to grow in.
Mhm.
I have not arrived, but I'm continuing to grow in this area. And this is something that every morning I have to sit before the Lord and I say, God, I'm surrendering this to you.
Yeah.
I'm surrendering my to-do list because I love to make to-do lists.
Oh, yeah. And
And
checking them off is like the best.
yeah, it's the best.
It is.
But I have to say, God, I give you my to-do list. I'm not going to be a slave to my to-do
Amen.
list. I'm
Mhm.
going to be available for what you want me to do. So if there's, um, I was just telling you before we started the show, I was telling you about something that had happened earlier that kind of it wasn't what I had planned, but it was something that I felt like, okay, well, this is what the Lord has for me right now. How can I be available to this person and minister to this person? And instead of clinging to my agenda and the things that I thought needed to be done at that time. And so if we can, where is it that scripture says, it talks about the good works that he has prepared in advance for us to do. If I'm stuck on my agenda, on my to-do list, then I'm going to miss those things that
Yeah.
he has brought along for me to do. I'll see those as interruptions.
Yes.
But so I can make my to-do list, but I'm going to hold it with an open palm. And
Mhm.
I every morning I have to ask the Lord for grace to help me do that. Because I also know my spirit is willing, but my flesh is weak. And I'm like, Lord,
Mhm.
I help me to surrender this to you and help me to surrender my strategy. For example, my kids. Oh, you know, one of my kids is going through a season that I am just struggling with. And in my I can there's a tendency in me to want to look at the outward fruit and to want to change the outward fruit instead of going to the root.
Mhm.
And of course, as much as we want to change our kids' hearts,
Mhm.
we can't. That's something that the Lord has to do. And so I have to surrender my strategy so I can have in mind what I need to do to fix this child, right?
Mhm.
We can fall into this trap thinking if nothing else, my kids will be XYZ, well behaved, or they'll do well in school, or,
Mhm.
we can have
Mhm.
these
Mhm.
idols, and it is so destructive when
Mhm.
we allow ourselves to be chained to these idols. We chain ourselves to these idols, and so I need to surrender those things and say, okay, God, this is your child.
Mhm.
Help me to minister to their heart. Speak through
Mhm.
me, use me, help me to be surrendered, not to cling to my idea of what this child needs to look like, what the outward fruit needs to look like, to be okay when people make judgments of me as their mom, to
Mhm.
be okay with those things
Mhm.
and to surrender that to you and just use me to touch their heart, to minister to their heart where their heart needs it the most right now.
It's so good. And I love that you use terms that are, um, I don't know what the right word would be, but use terms like chained, like being chained to,
Yeah.
and idols, that it's an idol. Like these are like maybe more extreme words, more harsh words, but they're very accurate words because too many of us see this as a good problem to have. Like, oh, I'm a hard worker, I'm an overworker, I'm a workaholic. Like that's a good thing, you know? Um,
Yeah.
or when how are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy, so busy. Like
Hmm.
we wear this as like badges of honor on how busy we are and how much we work and all the things. And don't get me wrong, a lot of us are busy. But is that where we're getting our value from? And I love when you're talking about with your children, again, the difference between fruit and root. I
Hmm.
remember when we're newly empty nesters and when our kids were young, we read a book called Parenting is Heart Work.
Mm.
It's heart, not hard work. Parenting is heart
Yeah.
work. And for us, we want to have those family rules. Don't hit, don't bite, don't scream. Instead of guiding their heart of
Hmm.
treat people like you want to be treated,
Hmm.
and more character value things that focusing on versus the performance checks of how it looks like on the outside. Because I was a candy coated hellion as a teenager. On the outside, I looked sweet, innocent, but on the inside, I was full of death, hell, and destruction. And I was going down really quick until my mom and my parents prayed and fasted for my deliverance. And
Mm.
so I know how easy it is to put on the label and the facade of looking like we've got it all put together when our heart is full of deceit and lies and shame and sin and whatever it is. We could fill in the blank. But when I was thinking about that book as you were talking, Parenting is Heart Work, I
Hmm.
was thinking, God, that's how you feel about us too. Like
Mm.
our Heavenly Father, when He is looking at us, that's exactly what His heavenly strategy is for us. It's heart
Hmm.
work.
Yeah.
It's Him wanting to get there to mold and to shape and to heal and to bind up our broken hearts and
Yeah.
to get us to the place of wholehearted living and thriving and abundance that we have from Him, which is the root and the fruits
Yeah.
come from it. So,
Yeah. That's good.
well, this is such, I love this discussion. So many things that we could talk about. I so
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on here and sharing some of your story and for writing this book, Let Go, Transform Your Life Out of Frustration and Defeat by Giving God Control. And so thank you for even just sharing daily, like where you're at of like, God, I think of the terms where I might start doing and just saying, God, I'm interruptible. I want to be that person who's
Mm.
interruptible, where like, God, like if you have to scream, scream. If you just have to tap me on the shoulder wherever I'm at, like I want to be interruptible.
Hmm.
And so thank you for teaching us how to be interruptible and to just get in that place of surrendering to Him and what He has for us. So thank you so much for this time, Rachel.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's been fun.
Yeah. Well, y'all, if you want to learn more about Rachel, what she's doing, I will in the show notes put a link to her book and her ministry and all the things her and her husband are doing. I encourage you. This is a quick but powerful read that I always love to tell moms, especially like put these kind of books in your car or in your bathroom, because these are great books to get in the right place as you're going about your day and stealing those pockets of time to get in the right place. So, great gifts as well too. So, all right, y'all. Well, if you know somebody who could use this topic, which is releasing control and recovering from perfectionism, would you share it with a loved one too? And our heart and our hope and prayer is that you would be interruptible too, because I know that our Heavenly Father has so much for you, for your heart, and for your everyday abundant living that He wants for you. So I hope this blessed you. Rachel, thank you so much again for being here. And we'll see y'all next time on my Full Life and Faith Leaves podcast with me, Tiffany Jo Baker. Bye, y'all. Be blessed.
Well, friends, thank you for joining us today on my Full Life and Faith Leaves podcast. If you enjoyed our time together and are taking away a nugget that has inspired your soul and success, would you share this episode with a loved one who could use it too? And if you haven't already, take a moment to rate and review this podcast and help me help others fuel and fulfill their faith journeys. Until next time, I'm Tiffany Jo Baker, a 3-time surrogate, speaker, and strategizer who loves to help you birth your God-given dreams at home and around the world. Now go do all the things God has called and created you to do with the grace and gifts God has given you.